The risks of a war with China are growing. US sending more warships to Indo-Pacific. Coming years, U.S. naval forces will be more assertive in opposing China in the Indo-Pacific, this according to a paper released yesterday by the Pentagon. The document identifies the South China Sea as the hottest theater for future operations in Asia by the U.S. Navy, Marines and Coast Guard. According to several observers, such a scenario increases the risk of a conflict between the two powers. Beijing claims sovereignty over almost the entire South China Sea, but faces the opposition of several countries in the region, which have the backing of the United States. For the U.S. military, China is adopting an expansionist approach in the South China Sea and seeking to establish regional hegemony through programs such as the Belt and Road Initiative. The main charge against Beijing is that it is systematically violating international law of the sea. Despite the coronavirus pandemic, the United States has stepped up its maritime operations in the South China Sea. In August, a U.S. Navy ship came close to an incident with the Chinese Navy near the Paracel Islands. According to experts, two warships accidentally colliding might be the spark that sets the fuse of conflict between the two powers. For Harvard University professor Graham Allison, war might break out between an emerging power like China and a declining one like the United States, the so-called Thucydides trap. The surge in U.S. naval operations in the Western Pacific is a response to those U.S. political and academic circles that are calling for action to prevent Beijing from gaining immediate geopolitical gains. This is happening as the U.S. prepares to confront China until the end of the century, on the model of the confrontation it won with the Soviets. This is where Taiwan comes in. Recently, China's state-owned CCTV broadcast a documentary showing a mock battle with tanks during a possible invasion of the island. Taiwan is considered by Beijing a rebel province, and on several occasions Chinese leaders have not ruled out the use of force to retake it. In order to be able to send troops and armored vehicles on Taiwan, Beijing has invested time and resources in recent years to boost its landing forces. Taipei has responded by building 8 modern submarines and a fleet of corvettes that would be pitted against Chinese aircraft carriers and amphibious vehicles. Taiwan's government has also obtained the green light from the United States for the purchase of strategic weapons worth billions of dollars. Despite recent attempts at mending diplomatic fences, territorial disputes also keep alive the possibility of a conflict between China and Japan, another U.S. ally. Tokyo announced today that it is developing a new anti-ship missile model capable of hitting targets at a very long range. Such a weapon would be used against any attack from China against the Okinawa Islands, as well as the uninhabited Japanese-administered Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, which Beijing also claims known as Diaoyu in China. The Pentagon has warned that U.S. maritime forces are to become more forceful in responding to acts of aggression, expansionism and breaches of international law, citing Beijing in particular, which has been criticized for its expansionist ambitions in the South China Sea. A new report signed by the heads of the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Navy and U.S. Coast Guard said that the rules-based international order is once again under assault, and the security environment had dramatically changed since 2015. The report said that China and Russia were now determined rivals of the U.S., with China presenting the most pressing long-term strategic threat. China is the only rival with the combined economic and military potential to present a long-term, comprehensive challenge to the U.S., the report said. It seeks to corrode international maritime governance, deny access to traditional logistical hubs, inhibit freedom of the seas, control use of key choke points, deter our engagement in regional disputes, and displace the United States as the preferred partner in countries around the world. China is in the midst of a rapid modernization and expansion of its military power. Its naval force is the world's largest, more than tripling in size over the past 2 decades. It has embarked on aggressive expansionism in the South and East China Seas, with frequent military drills, and in the Taiwan Strait, with near-daily incursions into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone. In response, the U.S. has increased its naval activity in the region and enacted sanctions against China. U.S. globally deployed naval forces interact with Chinese and Russian warships and aircraft daily, the report said, noting their growing aggressiveness and calling China the most pressing, long-term strategic threat. The latest incident between U.S. and Chinese naval forces took place in late August, when Beijing said it had driven a U.S. warship from the Paracel Islands, which are also claimed by Taiwan and Vietnam. To counter China, the U.S. has been sending ships to the region more frequently to carry out what it calls freedom of navigation operations. The Pentagon report said that in the event of a conflict, China and Russia would likely attempt to seize territory before the U.S. and its allies could effectively respond. To maintain strategic advantage over the Chinese Navy, the U.S. plans to modernize its naval force with smaller, more agile, and even remotely piloted ships. U.S. ships would also accept calculated tactical risks and adopt a more assertive posture in China day-to-day operations. The report accused Russia and China of employing all instruments of power to undermine the international system and remake it in their own interests, in part by incrementally conducting a variety of malign activities to not trigger a military response. Meanwhile, the South China Sea is the most important body of water for the world economy through it passes at least 1/3 of global trade. It is also the most dangerous body of water in the world, the place where the militaries of the United States and China could most easily collide. Chinese and American warships have just barely averted several incidents there over the past few years, and the Chinese military has warned off U.S. jets flying above. In July, the two nations carried out competing naval exercises in those waters. Given what is called the growing strategic rivalry between Washington and Beijing, the specter of an accident that in turn triggers a larger military confrontation preoccupies strategists in both capitals. These tensions grow out of a disagreement between the two countries as to whether the South China Sea is Chinese territory, a quarrel that speaks to a deeper dispute about maritime sovereignty, how it is decided upon, and the fundamental rights of movement in those waters. The standoff over the South China Sea thus has many levels of complexity. It is not simply about one body of water, or a single boundary. As Tommy Koh, a senior Singaporean diplomat who led negotiations to create the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, told me, the South China Sea is about law, power, and resources, and about history.